The valley of Nan-Kurunir had long ceased to be a place of green and growing things. Under the iron rule of Saruman the White, the circle of Isengard had been transformed into a festering wound upon the face of Middle-earth. The ancient trees that once whispered to the stones were gone, fed into the furnaces that burn day and night, their black smoke choking the stars and painting the moon in hues of bruised purple. The air tasted of ash, sulfur, and the sour sweat of 10,000 Uruk-hai toiling in the deep pits, forging weapons for a war that would end the age of men. Saruman, standing upon the balcony of the Orthanc, the indestructible black tower that pierced the sky like a jagged needle, looked down upon his industry with a cold, calculating pride. He saw order. He saw progress. He saw a machine of conquest that he believed was the pinnacle of power in this world. He was wrong. The wizard's gaze, usually fixed on the political machinations of Rohan or the dark will emanating from Mordor via the Palantir, was suddenly drawn upward. The storm clouds that perpetually shrouded the peak of Methydras were behaving erratically. They were not merely swirling. They were boiling, illuminated from within by a violet light that was neither the cold glow of the moon nor the fiery red of the eye. It was a synthetic, alien luminescence that crackled with a sound like tearing metal, a frequency that set the teeth of every orc in the valley on edge. The wolves in the kennels began to howl, a mournful, terrified chorus that rose above the clangor of the forges. My lord, Grima Wormtongue, pale and shivering, stepped out from the shadows of the doorway, wrapping his cloak tighter around his gaunt frame. The sky, it bleeds. Is this a sign from the east? Has the Dark Lord sent new aid? Saruman narrowed his eyes, his grip tightening on his black staff. He extended his senses, pushing his mind into the ether, seeking the familiar signature of Sauron's magic. But what he found was a void, a cold mathematical vacuum that repelled his consciousness with shocking force. No, Saruman murmured, a flicker of genuine uncertainty crossing his face. This is not Mordor. This is something else, something ancient, yet entirely new. Before the wizard could postulate further, the sky tore open. It was not a magical portal of swirling mists, but a violent rupture in the fabric of reality, a hexagonal grid of hard light that shattered the clouds. From this breach, 5 burning objects descended. They did not fall with the chaotic tumble of meteors. They moved with predatory precision, adjusting their trajectories with bursts of thruster fire that sounded like thunderclaps. They were colossal, wreathed in flames of atmospheric entry, aiming directly for the ring of Isengard. "Shields!" Saruman roared, slamming his staff against the stone. "Raise the dams! Alert the archers!" But it was a command born of panic, useless against the physics of what was approaching. The first object struck the ground just outside the southern gate, the impact wave pulverizing the stone watchtowers and sending a cloud of debris mushrooming into the stratosphere. The earth of Isengard, beaten hard by years of marching iron-shod boots, cracked like dry clay. Then came the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth, landing in a perfect tactical formation around the central impact site. The shockwaves flattened the wooden scaffolding in the pits, burying hundreds of Uruk-hai under tons of timber and rock. The fires of the forges were blown out, plunging the valley into a sudden dusty twilight, illuminated only by the fires burning on the hulls of the visitors. Saruman leaned over the balcony, his wizard's eyes piercing the dust. He expected to see dragons or perhaps some great beasts of the ancient world. What he saw defied every law of nature he had studied for millennia. The burning craters began to shift. The metal, which should have been cooling, began to move. Gears the size of millstones ground together with a sound that vibrated in the rib cages of the watching orcs. Plates of gray and purple armor shifted, locked, and rotated. Blue lights, cold and unfeeling, flickered to life, cutting through the smoke. The central figure rose from its crater, towering 30 feet into the air. It was a colossus of sharp angles and heavy weaponry, a fusion cannon mounted on its right arm that glowed with a terrifying violet energy. Its face was a mask of silver cruelty, dominated by optics that burned with the red hunger of a predator. Megatron, leader of the Decepticons, took his first step onto the soil of Middle-earth. His servos hissed, venting superheated coolant that instantly turned the surrounding air into steam. He scanned the horizon, his internal chronometer adjusting to the local rotation speed, his atmospheric sensors tasting the primitive air. "Report." Megatron's voice was a deep, metallic growl that sounded like tectonic plates grinding together. It was loud enough to be heard clearly at the top of Orthonk, amplified by his vocal processors. From the crater to his left, a sleeker, winged form transformed, the wings folding onto its back to form a cape of aerodynamical alloy. Starscream shook the dust from his chassis, his high-pitched, screeching voice dripping with disdain. Atmosphere rich in oxygen and nitrogen. Gravity 0.9 of Cybertron standard. Primitive organic life forms detected in mass quantities. And mud. So much mud. Lord Megatron, you promised us a high-energy conduit, not a dirt ball infested with insects. "Silence, you screeching fool," Megatron snapped, turning his massive head. "Soundwave?" The third figure, boxy and silent, stepped forward. A visor of oscillating sound waves replaced a face, and from his chest compartment, a bird-like drone ejected, transforming into a robotic condor that immediately took to the sky. "Laserbeak." Soundwave's synthesized, monotonous voice echoed. "Energy signature detected. Source, the Obsidian Tower. Nature, unknown. Highly unstable. Resembles raw, dark energon, but chaotic." "Excellent." Megatron smiled, a horrifying expression of shifting metal plates. "And the locals?" "Hostile," grunted the fourth figure, a cyclopean giant with a single yellow eye and a gun where a hand should be. "Shockwave." "Probability of threat from indigenous species, 0.0%. However, their numbers are significant." "Kill them all," Megatron ordered casually as if swatting flies. "Clear a path to the tower. I want that energy source." Down in the pits, the Uruk-hai were recovering from their shock. These were not cowardly goblins. They were the fighting Uruk-hai, bred for war, fearless and bloodthirsty. The sight of these metal giants did not send them fleeing. It enraged them. Lurtz, the commander of the scouts, roared a guttural challenge, rallying his troops. "Meat, metal, scraps, bring them down, grind them to dust." 10,000 Uruk-hai surged forward, a black tide of iron helmets, pikes, and scimitars. They swarmed out of the pits and the barracks, their war cries shaking the remaining walls. Arrows thick and black-feathered flew in clouds, raining down upon the Decepticons. Barricade, the fifth Decepticon, smaller than the others but built for pursuit and crowd control, laughed. The arrows pinged harmlessly off his Cybertronian alloy armor, shattering like glass. "They're attacking with sticks. Look at them." "It's adorable." He transformed his hand into a spinning spiked wheel, the gyro blade, and revved his engine. "Let's introduce them to the highway code." The slaughter that followed was not a battle. It was an industrial accident on a continental scale. Barricade skated forward, the wheels in his feet tearing up the ground, and plowed into the front line of the Uruk-hai. Bodies were flung into the air, broken and twisted. His spinning blade turned the elite pikemen into a fine red mist. Starscream took to the air, hovering just above the reach of the pikes. He activated his null-ray cannons. "Kneel before your masters!" he shrieked, firing beams of violet energy into the densest clusters of orcs. Each shot didn't just kill, it vaporized, leaving nothing but charred shadows on the ground. The heat was so intense that the armor of the Uruks fused to their skin before they disintegrated. Megatron did not even bother to draw a weapon yet. He simply walked. Every step crushed an Uruk high. When they swarmed his legs, stabbing uselessly at his hydraulic lines with their crude steel, he would simply kick, sending dozens of them flying into the stone walls of the ring, shattering their bones. An Olog high, a massive mountain troll bred by Sauron and lent to Saruman, roared and charged Megatron, swinging a hammer the size of a boulder. Megatron caught the hammer with one hand. The impact rang like a bell, but the Decepticon leader didn't budge an inch. He looked at the troll, his red optics narrowing in amusement. "Biology," he sneered. "Inefficient." With a casual twist of his wrist, he crushed the solid iron hammerhead into scrap metal, then backhanded the troll. The beast's head snapped back with a sickening crack, and the massive creature crumpled lifeless to the ground. From the balcony of Orthanc, Saruman watched his army, his magnificent, unbeatable army, being dismantled like children's toys. The fear he had felt earlier began to curdle into a cold, desperate anger. These beings were powerful, yes. Their armor was impervious to steel. But Saruman was not a mere warlord. He was a Maya, a being of spirit and power cloaked in flesh. He knew the secret fire. He possessed a voice that could enslave kings. "They are machines," Saruman whispered to himself, his mind racing. "Golems of iron and fire, and machines can be commanded." He amplified his voice, using the acoustics of the tower and his own magic to project it across the valley. "Halt!" The word rolled over the battlefield like a physical wave of force. It carried the weight of authority, a spell of command woven into the syllables. The Uruk-hai froze, conditioned to obey that voice above all else. Even the Decepticons paused, their audio receptors processing the strange, resonant frequency that seemed to try and bypass their firewalls and speak directly to their sparks. Megatron stopped, his fusion cannon humming as it powered down slightly. He looked up at the tower, zooming his optics to focus on the white figure on the balcony. "I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman of many colors," the wizard proclaimed, his voice dripping with honey and venom. "You possess great power, strangers from the stars, power that I respect. But you are trespassers in my domain. I offer you a choice. Submit to my will, serve the White Hand, and I shall grant you dominion over the lands of men. Resist, and you shall know the true power of the Astari." Starscream hovered near Megatron's shoulder. "He's offering us a job, the audacity. Let me blast him off that perch, Lord Megatron." "Wait," Megatron raised a hand. He was intrigued, not by the offer, but by the arrogance. It mirrored his own. "He speaks with the tongue of a deceiver. I like him." Megatron stepped forward, crushing a pile of Uruk corpses. He looked up at the tower. "I am Megatron, leader of the Decepticons, and I serve no one, especially not a flesh creature in a bathrobe." Saruman's face hardened. He raised his staff. "Then fall." He chanted a spell in Quenya, a word of power that commanded the elements. "Naur Nedraith Amen, Naur Danin Gaur Hoth." Fire did not just spring from his staff. It erupted from the very air around the Decepticons. But this was not normal fire. It was magical fire, white and hot, fueled by the wizard's will. It engulfed Megatron, swirling around him, seeking the gaps in his armor, trying to cook the organic components of his spark chamber. "Warning, temperature levels critical." Soundwave's monotone voice reported as he deployed a sonic shield. Megatron roared, but it was not in pain. It was in fury. The magic burned. It felt like acid on his sensors. It defied physics, heating metal without a source. "Sorcery!" he bellowed. "Shockwave! Analysis!" Shockwave, standing amidst the magical inferno, was unfazed. His logic centers processing the data at light speed. Energy signature violates thermodynamic laws. Source is psionic in nature. Suggestion: disruption of the caster's concentration. With pleasure, Megatron aimed his fusion cannon at the balcony. Saruman, seeing the giant weapon level at him, realized his error. He had treated them like trolls, susceptible to pain. He had not treated them like tanks. He slammed his staff down, raising a barrier of invisible force around the balcony just as Megatron fired. The blast of the fusion cannon was a concentrated beam of antimatter. It struck Saruman's shield with the force of a nuclear impact. The white light blinded the entire valley. The shield held for a microsecond, then shattered. The explosion blew the balcony apart, sending stone and glass raining down. Saruman was thrown back into the chamber of the Orthanc. His robe singed, his staff vibrating violently in his hand. He scrambled to his feet, coughing in the dust. "Impossible," he wheezed. "That power, it rivals the Dark Lord himself." Outside, the Decepticons were advancing. The Uruk-hai, seeing their master attacked, broke their paralysis. They surged forward again, climbing the legs of the giants, trying to jam pikes into joints. "Sound wave," Megatron commanded, shaking off the remnants of the magical fire. "Clear the vermin. Use the sonic dampeners." Soundwave stepped forward and touched the ground. His chest speakers unfolded. He unleashed a pulse of infrasound, a frequency specifically calibrated to liquefy the internal organs of organic life forms. A low hum, felt rather than heard, swept across the pit. The Uruk-hai in a 100-yard radius simply dropped. Their eyes rolled back, blood poured from their ears, and they collapsed. Their brains turned to jelly. The silence that followed was terrified and absolute. "Open the gate," Megatron ordered, pointing at the massive adamantine doors of the Orthanc. "It is locked by magic," Starscream sneered, landing and scratching at the stone. "I can't find a mechanism." "Then we make a door." Megatron transformed. His body shifted, folded, and compacted into a sleek alien tank. The fusion cannon mounted on the turret hummed with maximum charge. He rolled forward, crushing the stone steps, and rammed the doors of Orthanc at full speed, firing point blank at the moment of impact. The boom shook the misty mountains. The doors of Orthanc, wrought by the Numenorians of old, unbreakable by any siege engine of Middle-earth, groaned. The metal heated to white-hot slag under the fusion blast, and the sheer kinetic force of a Cybertronian tank buckled the hinges. With a screech of tearing metal that sounded like a dying god, the doors fell inward. Megatron transformed back to robot mode and strode into the dim, vaulted hall of the tower. It was too small for him to stand fully upright, so he hunched, his metallic shoulders scraping the ancient carvings on the ceiling, showering dust onto the polished floor. Saruman stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down. He was cornered, but he was not defeated. He was an Istar. He had one card left to play. "You have breached my sanctuary," Saruman said, his voice regaining its composure, though his face was pale. "But you do not understand what you face. This tower is not merely stone, it is a conduit." He raised his hand, and the Palantir, sitting on its pedestal in the center of the room, began to glow. The eye of Sauron, wreathed in flame, projected from the stone, filling the room with a dreadful, oppressive presence. "Kneel," the voice of Sauron whispered, not a sound but a pressure on the mind. "Kneel before the Lord of the Earth." Megatron paused. He felt the intrusion. It was similar to the corruption of Dark Energon, a seductive, chaotic whisper promising ultimate power. It tried to seize control of his processor, to rewrite his code. Megatron laughed. It was a harsh, grinding sound. "You think to enslave me? I have wrestled with the Chaos Bringer, Unicron. I have survived the pits of Kion. I am the Emperor of Destruction." He reached out with his massive hand. The mental pressure of Sauron increased, trying to crush his will. Sparks flew from Megatron's head as his firewalls battled the magical intrusion. "Soundwave! Interface!" Megatron roared, struggling against the invisible weight. Soundwave rushed forward, extending a data spike from his wrist. He didn't attack Saruman, he attacked the Palantir. He jammed the spike into the base of the pedestal. "Initiating interface protocols," Soundwave intoned. "Decrypting psionic waveform, rerouting signal." The technological prowess of Cybertron clashed with the dark magic of Mordor. Soundwave's visor flashed with rapid streams of binary code. The image of the eye flickered, distorted, and pixelated. The whispering voice turned into a shriek of digital feedback. "What are you doing?" Saruman screamed, realizing they were not succumbing to the will but hacking it. "Stop! You will destroy the connection." "We are improving it," Shockwave stated, entering the hall. He scanned the Palantir. "This device is a trans-dimensional communication array. Primitive but effective. It connects to a centralized power grid in the east." "The east?" Megatron grunted, finally shaking off Sauron's mental grip as Soundwave stabilized the connection. He loomed over Saruman. The wizard looked tiny, fragile, like a doll made of parchment. Megatron reached down and pinched Saruman's robe between two massive fingers, lifting him into the air. Saruman dangled helplessly, his staff falling to the floor with a clatter. "You speak of power, wizard," Megatron sneered, bringing Saruman face to face with his red optic. "But you rely on tricks and shadows. I bring the certainty of steel. This tower, this factory of yours, it is quaint, but it is inefficient." Megatron looked around the hall, then through the shattered doors at the smoking pits of Isengard. "But it has potential. The raw materials are here. The labor force is disposable but numerous. And this energy source," he glanced at the digitized, glitching eye in the Palantir, "it is potent." What do you want?" Saruman gasped, his dignity finally shattering under the realization that he was utterly outmatched. "I want what I always want," Megatron said, dropping Saruman onto the cold stone floor. The wizard crumpled, gasping for breath. "Order through tyranny." Megatron turned to his lieutenants. "Shockwave, set up a command center in this tower. Analyze that sphere. I want to know how to draw energy from it. If this Sauron has power, we will siphon it. We will drain him dry to fuel our energon converters." "Compliance," Shockwave nodded. "Starscream," Megatron barked. "Yes, mighty Megatron?" Starscream asked, hovering nervously. "Take the skies. Scan the surrounding area. If anything moves, human, elf, or orc, that does not bear the Decepticon insignia, vaporize it. I want a perimeter established." "With pleasure!" Starscream transformed into a jet and shrieked out of the broken doors, transforming the sonic boom into a weapon that shattered the remaining windows of the tower. "Barricade," Megatron continued, looking down at the cowering Grima Wormtongue, who was hiding behind a pillar. "Round up the surviving organics, the Uruk-hai. They are strong. They can lift heavy loads. We will re-educate them. If they work, they live. If they resist, they are fuel." Megatron walked to the balcony, or what was left of it. He looked out over the ruined valley. The smoke was clearing, revealing the carnage, thousands of dead orcs. But tens of thousands remained huddled in fear, looking up at their new god. "Isengard is no more," Megatron declared, his voice booming across the valley. "This is now Dark Mount Station Alpha, and I am its lord." Saruman, bruising and battered, pulled himself up using the pedestal of the Palantir. He watched the metal giant. He felt the connection to Sauron flickering. The Dark Lord's rage, distant and confused, filtered through the strange alien machine that Soundwave had attached to the stone. Saruman's mind, ever opportunistic, began to turn. These beings were arrogant. They knew nothing of the ring, nothing of the valor, nothing of destiny. They thought they had conquered him, but perhaps they were merely a weapon he had not yet learned to wield. "My lord," Saruman said softly, bowing his head, hiding the gleam in his eyes. "The mines are deep. There is metal, there is fuel, but to the north, there are horsemen. They will come. They will see the smoke." Megatron glanced back, his metallic lips curling. "Let them come. I am low on target practice." As night fell over the valley, a new sound replaced the rhythmic clanging of orc hammers. It was the whine of drills, the roar of fusion cutters, and the heavy rhythmic thud of Cybertronian engineering reshaping the Earth. The Decepticons did not just occupy Isengard, they began to terraform it. Shockwave established a lab in Saruman's alchemy room, sweeping aside ancient scrolls to make room for holographic displays. He dissected a dead Uruk-hai, analyzing its biology. Organic structure, resilient. Muscle density high. Intelligence low. Suitable for drone modification. He turned to Saruman, who was watching with a mix of horror and fascination. "Wizard, explain the chemical composition of this blasting fire you utilize. It is crude, but combustible." Saruman hesitated, then stepped forward. "It is a mixture of orthanc fire and the black powder of the east. If refined, it can be enhanced," Shockwave finished. "We will combine it with energon radiation. We will create munitions that will crack this planet in half." Meanwhile, in the pits, Barricade was having the time of his life. He had transformed into his police car mode, his sirens wailing a terrifying, dissonant sound that drove the wargs into a frenzy. He drifted around the mud pits, herding the Uruk-hai like sheep. "Move it, maggots," he projected from his external speakers. "Dig faster. Lord Megatron wants a landing pad by dawn. You there, ugly? Stop eating your friend and pick up that shovel." The Uruk-hai, accustomed to the lash, understood violence. They understood hierarchy. This metal beast was stronger than Lurtz, stronger than Saruman. And so, they obeyed. They began to dig, not for swords, but for the foundations of a space bridge. High above, Starscream circled in the stratosphere. He looked down at the tiny lights of Rohan, at the golden hall of Edoras shimmering in the moonlight. "So peaceful," Starscream sneered. "So flammable." He banked his wings, his radar locking onto a patrol of riders near the fords of Isen. "Let's see if the locals allow for some sport." He dove, breaking the sound barrier. The sonic boom flattened the trees of Fangorn Forest's edge, waking something deep within the woods. Treebeard, eldest of the Ents, opened his eyes. He had felt the earth shake with the arrival of the falling stars. He had smelled the strange, acrid smoke. But this new sound, this screaming of the air itself, it was a hasty sound, a sound of death. "Room," Treebeard rumbled, his bark creaking. "Something is happening in the Wizard's Vale, something bad. The stones are crying." Back in the tower, Megatron stood before the Palantir. Soundwave had finished his work. The image of the eye was now stabilized, contained within a hexagonal field of hard light. "Sauron," Megatron addressed the image. "I know you can hear me. Your spy device is now my conference call." The eye pulsed with hatred. "Who are you?" The thought was clearer now, translated by Soundwave's algorithm. "You have no soul. You are a hollow shell." "I am the future," Megatron replied. "I require resources, energon, raw power. You will tell me where to find it." "There is no power but the ring," Sauron hissed. "And it is mine." "Ring?" Megatron scoffed. A piece of jewelry? You petty biologicals think so small. I speak of the energy that animates this planet. The core heat, the magnetic fields. You will die, Sauron promised. My armies are numberless. The Nazgul will strip the metal from your bones. Send them, Megatron challenged, his red optics flaring. Send your ghosts. Send your armies. I will use their corpses to pave the road to my new empire. He cut the connection with a gesture. The Palantir went dark. Soundwave, Megatron said, turning to the silent spy. What did you extract from the data stream before I cut him off? Planetary map downloaded, Soundwave replied, projecting a hologram of Middle-earth. Strategic locations identified: Mordor, high geothermal energy, potential for geothermal power plant. Minas Tirith, high concentration of processed stone and metal, defensive structure. The Shire, agriculture, irrelevant. And the ring he spoke of? Analysis indicates it is a localized psionic amplifier, dangerous, unstable. Find it, Megatron ordered. If it controls the minds of these creatures, it will be useful for the drone program, but first, we secure our base. Megatron walked to the window. The forges of Isengard were burning brighter now, but the flame was not the orange of wood fire. It was the violet of energon refinement. The Uruk-hai were hauling massive chunks of raw iron ore directed by the terrifying whip of Barricade's electrical prod. Scrapper and Mixmaster, part of the Constructicons who had arrived in the second wave of drop pods, undetected during the chaos, were already tearing down the outer walls to build automated turrets. The invasion of Middle-earth had begun not with a whisper, but with the roar of an engine. The white hand had fallen, replaced by the purple insignia. And as the dawn approached, the sun rose not on the world of men, but on the first day of the Cybertronian age. But deep in the forest of Fangorn, the Ents were gathering. And on the plains of Rohan, Yomer had found the slaughtered patrol. Men turned to mist, horses sliced in half by clean, cauterized cuts that no orc blade could make. He rode hard for Edoras, fear cold in his heart, carrying a message that would change the fate of the world. The war had changed. The enemy was no longer just at the gates. The enemy had become the gate, the tower, and the weapon itself. Megatron watched the sunrise, his metal hand clenching into a fist. He felt the vibration of the earth. He felt the magic of the world trying to reject him, but he just smiled. Peace through tyranny, he whispered to the wind. And this world is very peaceful. As the industrial cacophony of the new Isengard rose to a deafening crescendo, a small, stealthy figure detached itself from the shadows of the outer wall. It was a hobbit, Merry, who had been captured by the Uruks but escaped in the confusion of the crash. He stared up at the metal titans, his eyes wide with a terror that went beyond words. He clutched his elven cloak and began to crawl away, desperate to reach the forest, to warn Pippin, to warn anyone. But above him, the red optic of Laserbeak swiveled. The bird drone screeched, a sound of digital predatory delight, and dove. Merry began to run, but he was running from a creature that could fly faster than a fell beast. The hunt was on, and the game had just become much, much deadlier. The transformation of Isengard was terrifyingly rapid. Within hours, the lush, albeit abused valley was unrecognizable. The Constructicons, working in perfect unison, had erected spires of conductive metal that pierced the ground like needles, drawing geothermal heat directly from the deep crust to power their emergency energon synthesizers. The river Isen was not just dammed. It was rerouted through cooling vents, the water instantly flashing to steam as it washed over the superheated reactor cores Shockwave had cobbled together from the wreckage of their ship. Megatron stood in the center of the ring, watching the construction. He was satisfied, but his ambition was never sated. Shockwave, he commuted over the internal channel. Status on the space bridge receiver? Materials insufficient, Shockwave responded instantly. Local metallurgy is primitive. The iron lacks the tensile strength for dimensional transport. We require refined alloys, mithril, as the locals call it. Or we must strip mine this entire mountain range. Then we strip mine, Megatron replied. But first we deal with the neighbors, he pointed to the north. That kingdom of horsemen. They have metal, they have resources, and their flesh is weak. Prepare the Seekers. We launch a full-scale assault at midday. Lord Megatron, Starscream landed, transforming with a flourish. Why waste energy on the horsemen? Let us fly directly to the volcano, to this Mordor. If we decapitate the leadership of this world, the rest will fall in line. You lack vision, Starscream, Megatron growled, grabbing his second-in-command by the throat and lifting him off the ground. This Sauron is a being of energy. To fight him, we need to be at full power. We need an army of drones, and we need a fortress that can withstand magic. Isengard is that fortress. We will expand from here like a virus. He threw Starscream aside. Now go. Scout the mountain passes. I want to know if there are any other surprises waiting for us. As Starscream scrambled into the air, grumbling curses, Megatron turned his attention back to Saruman. The wizard was currently instructing a group of Uruk-hai on how to operate a Cybertronian heavy lifter. It was a grotesque sight. Magic and machine forced into an unholy alliance. "Wizard!" Megatron called out. Saruman hurried over, bowing low. He had learned quickly that pride meant pain in the presence of Megatron. "Yes, Lord Megatron. Tell me of the ring," Megatron commanded. "Soundwave's analysis suggests it is a storage device, a backup drive for this Sauron." "It is much more," Saruman said, his eyes gleaming. "It is a weapon. It commands the wills of others. It amplifies power. If you were to possess it, with your strength, you could reshape reality itself." Megatron considered this, a device that could rewrite reality. It sounded like the Allspark, or perhaps a matrix of leadership corrupted. "Where is it?" "It moves towards Mordor," Saruman said, carried by a halfling, a small, insignificant creature. "Two of them were captured by my scouts, but you lost them," Megatron finished coldly. Typical organic incompetence. "They are in the forest," Saruman pointed to Fangorn. "Or they were." "Laserbeak is hunting one," Megatron noted. "If there is another, Soundwave will find it." At that moment, a massive tremor shook the ground. It didn't come from the machines, it came from the earth itself. The roots of the mountain seemed to groan. "What is that?" Megatron demanded, stabilizing himself with his gyros. "The Ents," Saruman whispered, sudden fear in his voice. "The shepherds of the trees, they have woken." From the tree line of Fangorn they emerged, not an army of flesh, but of wood and moss and stone. Giants 30, 40 feet tall, striding with a slowness that belied their terrible strength. Treebeard led them, his eyes burning with a deep, ancient rage. They had seen the smoke. They had heard the screams of the earth as the Decepticons drilled into her flesh. "They come to break the stone," Treebeard boomed, his voice like a cracking bow. "They come with metal and fire. We shall break them." Megatron looked at the advancing forest. He started to laugh, a deep, cruel, mechanical laugh. "Trees?" he asked incredulously. "This planet sends vegetation to fight me?" He activated his fusion cannon. "Burn them!" The Decepticons turned their weapons toward the forest. The Uruk-hai, emboldened by their new masters, roared and banged their shields. The Battle of Isengard was about to begin in earnest. But this time it wouldn't be orcs against trees. It would be nature against the machine god. "Decepticons, transform and rise up!" Megatron roared. turn this forest into ash." A barrage of missiles from Starscream, who had looped back sensing a fight, struck the front line of the Ents. Wood shattered, leaves incinerated, but the Ents did not stop. They were furious, and their hides were thick. One Ent picked up a massive boulder and hurled it. It struck a Decepticon drone, a generic Viacon, crushing its chest plate and sending it sparking to the ground. "They fight back!" Barricade yelled, firing his shotgun at a walking oak. "And they're tough. They are kindling!" Megatron shouted. He aimed his cannon and fired. The blast hit an Ent squarely in the center. There was no resistance. The creature simply evaporated in a flash of antimatter fire, leaving only 2 smoking stumps. "Advance!" Megatron commanded. "Show them the futility of resistance." As the Decepticons charged to meet the Ents, the clash was titanic. Metal tore into wood, branches smashed into circuitry. The sheer scale of the conflict dwarfed anything Middle-earth had seen in the Third Age. And watching from the high tower, Soundwave recorded it all, analyzing combat data, searching for weaknesses, preparing for the long war ahead. The conquest had begun, and nothing, not wizards, not Dark Lords, not ancient trees, would stand in the way of the Decepticon ambition. The Age of the Ring was ending. The Age of Iron had come. The destruction of the Ents was not a battle. It was an extermination. The ancient shepherds of the forest, who had weathered the axes of dwarves and the fires of orcs for eons, crumbled before the fury of Cybertronian weaponry. Megatron stood amidst the burning grove at the foot of Orthanc, watching as the last of the Onodrim, a towering beach-like giant, was torn apart by the gravitational vortex of Shockwave's Singularity launcher. The Ent fell in slow motion, its wood groaning a final mournful note that seemed to vibrate through the very bedrock of Middle-earth, before shattering into splinters against the iron-hard ground. "Combustible," Shockwave noted, lowering his smoking weapon. "Efficiency of local biomass as fuel, high. Suggest we harvest the remainder of the forest for the Energon synthesizers." "Do it!" Megatron commanded, turning his back on the inferno. The smoke from the burning Fangorn rose to mix with the black smog of the pits, creating a canopy of absolute darkness that blocked out the stars. "And get those defenses operational." I sense the eye turning its full gaze upon us. He is done watching. Megatron was right. In the land of Mordor, in the heart of the Barad-dûr, Sauron had felt the death of the Ents. He had felt the shift in power. This was no longer a nuisance. This was a usurper. The Dark Lord realized that his plan to crush Gondor must wait. There was a new apex predator in the west. The great eye flared with a hatred that turned the clouds over Mount Doom blood red. The black gates opened, not for a raiding party, but for the full might of the east. And from the high towers, the Nine mounted their fell beasts. The Witch King of Angmar shrieked a command that chilled the souls of men miles away, and the Nazgul took flight, winging west with the speed of a gathering storm. Days turned into a blur of industrial nightmare. Under Barricade's brutal oversight, the Uruk-hai and captured Rohirrim worked until they dropped, transforming Isengard into a fortress of chrome and steel. The walls were plated with scavenged metal. Automated turrets tracked every movement in the valley. And in the center, atop the broken spire of Orthanc, Soundwave had constructed a massive dish. A subspace relay meant to pierce the dimensional veil and contact the Decepticon armada. But before the signal could be sent, the war arrived. It began with a shadow that fell over the valley, darker than the smoke. The screech of the Nazgul pierced the air, a sound of magical terror that made the Uruk-hai cower and drop their tools. But the Decepticons did not cower. They had no souls to freeze. "Aerial contacts," Soundwave blared, his chest deck ejecting ravage and rumble. "Biological flyers, 9 targets, closing speed subsonic." Starscream, perched on a scaffold, ignited his thrusters. Finally, target practice. He launched himself into the sky, transforming mid-air into his jet mode. The sonic boom shattered the magical dread radiating from the Nazgul. The Witch King, riding a massive beast of leathery wings and foul breath, saw the silver bird approaching. He raised his Morgul blade, preparing a curse of withering. But magic requires a mind to latch onto, and Starscream was a creature of cold logic and vanity. "Eat heat, you flying gecko!" Starscream shrieked. A barrage of heat-seeking missiles detached from his wings. The Nazgul banked, their beasts diving with unnatural agility. The missiles trailed them, locking onto the heat signatures of the fell beasts. Two of the ring wraiths were too slow. The missiles struck their mounts, blowing them into gory chunks of meat and shadow. The wraiths fell, their cloaks fluttering like broken kites, plummeting thousands of feet to smash against the metal plating of the valley floor. The Witch King roared in fury, pulling his beast into a steep climb, trying to outmaneuver the jet. He unleashed a scream of despair, a magical attack meant to stop the heart of any living foe. Starscream's sensors flared red. "Warning, audio receptors overloaded," Starscream's voice crackled. "Annoying frequency detected." He flipped his jet inverted, hitting the afterburners. The backwash of pure fire engulfed the Witch King's beast. The creature caught fire instantly, thrashing in the air. As the Witch King spiraled down, Starscream transformed back to robot mode, falling through the air alongside him and kicked the Nazgul leader with a force of 10 tons. The Witch King slammed into the side of Orthanc, cracking the stone before sliding down to the ground, his physical form shattered, his spirit wailing in impotence. "Magic!" Starscream scoffed, activating his thrusters to hover above the fallen wraith. Obsolete. But the ground war had just begun. The armies of Mordor poured through the Gap of Rohan. Hundreds of thousands of orcs, trolls, and Easterlings. They washed over the fords of Isen like a black tide. Megatron stood at the gates of his new fortress. He did not order the Uruk-hai to fight, he wanted to test his own upgrades. "Constructicons, unite!" he bellowed. Scrapper, Mixmaster, Longhaul, Scavenger, Bone Crusher, and Hook drove forward from the construction sites. They revved their engines, a mechanical symphony of destruction, and then the impossible happened. They began to merge. Limbs folded, joints locked, and heavy plates shifted. In a display of engineering that defied gravity, they combined into a single colossal entity towering over the mountain peaks. Devastator. The giant roared, a sound of grinding metal that made the ground quake. He looked down at the army of Mordor, which had suddenly halted, their war drums falling silent in the face of this mechanical god. "Crush!" Devastator boomed. He stepped forward. One footfall flattened an entire phalanx of Easterlings. He reached down and scooped up a siege tower, crushing it in his hand like a cardboard box, and hurled the debris into the ranks of the trolls. Megatron watched with a cruel smile. "Decepticons, attack! Leave none alive!" It was a massacre. The Decepticons waded into the army of Mordor like wolves among sheep. Shockwave stood on the walls, calculating trajectories, his arm cannon firing rhythmic pulses of violet energy that vaporized lines of orcs. Barricade drifted through the chaos, his wheel spikes tearing through legs and armor. Soundwave unleashed a sonic frequency that shattered the obsidian weapons of the enemy. Sauron, watching from Barad-dûr, felt a flicker of something he had not felt since the fall of Númenor. Fear. His armies were evaporating, his Nazgul were grounded, and the enemy was not even using magic. They were using a power he could not understand, a power of metal and mathematics. But Sauron had one advantage. He knew where the ring was. And in the chaos of the war, he saw a chance. He directed his will not at the Decepticons, but at the weak minds of the organics near them. Grima Wormtongue, cowering in the shadow of a generator, felt the voice in his head. The device. Destroy the device. Grima's eyes glazed over. He picked up a heavy pry bar and moved toward the subspace relay Soundwave had built. He didn't know what it was, but the voice told him it was the key. He jammed the bar into the exposed circuitry. Sparks flew. A capacitor overloaded. The relay exploded in a shower of blue plasma. Alert! Soundwave turned, his visor flashing. Communications array compromised. Sabotage. Megatron whipped around, seeing the smoking ruin of his only link to Cybertron. He saw Wormtongue standing there, laughing maniacally with the voice of Sauron. "You are trapped here," Grima shrieked, his voice overlapping with the Dark Lord's. "You will rust in this world." Megatron raised his fusion cannon and vaporized Wormtongue instantly. But the damage was done. The relay was dead. They were alone. "Lord Megatron," Shockwave reported, emotionless as always. "Without the relay, we cannot summon the fleet. Our energy reserves are finite. We cannot sustain a war of attrition against an entire planet." Megatron looked at the burning horizon. He looked at the devastation his forces had wrought. And then, his optic landed on something Laserbeak had just dropped at his feet. It was a small golden ring. Laserbeak had found the halflings. Not in the forest, but near the borders of the battle, trying to sneak past. The drone had stunned them and retrieved the object that radiated such strange energy. Megatron picked it up. It was tiny in his massive metal hand. He pinched it between two fingers, bringing it up to his eye. "I see you," Sauron's voice thundered in Megatron's mind, stronger than ever. "You hold my soul, put it on, and we shall be one." "Soundwave," Megatron said quietly. "Analyze." Soundwave extended a sensor probe, scanning the ring. "Object is a hyper-dense psionic storage medium, contains a polarized consciousness, energy output, theoretically infinite. It feeds on ambition." "Ambition?" Megatron mused. "I have plenty of that." "Warning," Shockwave interjected. "Interface with biological magic is untested. Probability of spark corruption 89%. "I have corrupted entire worlds, Shockwave," Megatron growled. "This primitive trinket will not rule me. I will rule it." Megatron did not put the ring on his finger. It wouldn't fit. Instead, he opened his chest plates, revealing the glowing, pulsing core of his spark chamber. The very soul of a Cybertronian. "I am Megatron," he roared at the ring. "I am the Decepticon leader. I bow to no one." He thrust the One Ring directly into his spark. For a moment, time stopped. A shockwave of silent energy swept out from Isengard. The fighting stopped. The orcs dropped their weapons. Devastator froze mid-step. Even the wind died. Then, Megatron screamed. It was a sound of digital agony and ecstatic power. Violet energy turned gold. The gold turned black. Lightning arced from Megatron's body, striking the tower, the ground, the sky. His armor began to shift. The gray metal darkened to a void black, etched with burning elvish runes that glowed like molten lava. His fusion cannon morphed, growing jagged spikes, pulsing with the dark magic of Mordor fused with the cosmic power of the Allspark. Inside his mind, the battle was titanic. Sauron, the ancient Maya, fought Megatron, the gladiator of Kaon. Will against logic, magic against machine. Sauron tried to dominate Megatron's mind with visions of fear. Megatron laughed and showed Sauron the destruction of Cybertron, 1 billion years of war. Sauron tried to offer power. Megatron showed him that he was power. The Decepticons' will was forged in the smelting pits of a dead world. It was harder than adamantine. Slowly, inexorably, Megatron's code overwrote Sauron's magic. He didn't submit to the ring. He assimilated it. He compiled Sauron into a subroutine. Megatron opened his eyes. They were no longer red. They were a burning vertical slit of fire ringed by purple plasma. The eye of Sauron atop Barad-dûr flickered and went out. The Dark Lord was no longer in Mordor. He was in the chassis of the Decepticon. Decepticons! Megatron's voice was now a legion, a terrifying chorus of metal and shadow. Transform! He pointed his new cannon at the distant Mount Doom. Target the volcano, fire! He didn't fire a missile. He fired a beam of pure, concentrated reality-warping energy. The beam crossed the miles in an instant, striking Orodruin. The volcano didn't erupt, it imploded. The magical fires were sucked into a singularity, collapsing the very heart of Sauron's realm. Barad-dûr, stripped of its foundation, crumbled into dust. The armies of Mordor, seeing their god vanish and their land destroyed, broke. They didn't run. They fell to their knees, worshipping the new Lord of the Earth. The surviving members of the Fellowship, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Gandalf, watched from a distant ridge, their hearts heavy with a terror far deeper than anything Sauron had inspired. "The Dark Lord is gone," Aragorn whispered, lowering his sword. "And something worse has taken his place," Gandalf said, his staff trembling. "This is not a shadow that can be dispelled by sunlight. This is a cold iron cage that will cover the world." Megatron ascended to the top of the reconstructed Orthanc, which now resembled a Cybertronian spire reaching into the exosphere. He sat upon a throne made from the fused armor of the Ents and the Nazgûl. Devastator stood guard at the gates. Starscream patrolled the skies, now leading a squadron of mass-produced drone jets built from the melted-down weapons of the Rohirrim. Soundwave approached the throne. "Lord Megatron, planet subjugation 40% complete, resistance negligible, energy harvest optimal." Megatron looked at the screen showing the map of Middle-earth, the green of the Shire, the white of Gondor. Soon it would all be metal. "Excellent," Megatron rumbled. He looked at his hand where the fiery runes pulsed beneath his armor. He felt the connection to every living thing in Middle-earth, a connection he could twist and control. He raised his hand, and the moon above parted the clouds, revealing that half of its surface had already been mechanized by a drone swarm sent hours ago. "This world is but a stepping stone," Megatron declared, his gaze turning upward to the stars that he had once fallen from. "We will convert this planet into a warship. We will drain its core, and then we will return to Cybertron, and I will show the Autobots the true meaning of power." He clenched his fist, and across the land from the mines of Moria to the Grey Havens, the earth shook in submission. The Age of Men never began. The Third Age ended in fire and ash. The Cybertronian Age had dawned, cold, eternal, and perfectly ordered, and in the silence of the void, the Decepticon insignia burned purple against the blackness of space, a warning to any who would dare approach the sector formerly known as Middle-earth. All hail Megatron.